Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet. Together, we are Kenny and Renny, and this is the Kenny and Renny post-game show after an interesting game against the Dallas Stars. Dallas essentially doing to the Winnipeg Jets what they did to the two teams they played previous to that. An interesting-looking squad out of Dallas. I got to be honest, with Pete DeBoer going there, I thought that team was maybe going to take a little bit of a step back. I know we're only 3 games in. Yeah, they're 3-0. Lots of year to be played. But what I'm seeing early on from Dallas is they still seem to have that ability to kind of shut things down defensively. And of course, Jake Ottinger is going to help with that. If you were listening to this podcast over the last couple of years, you've been hearing me say Jake Ottinger is coming. He's a problem for the rest of the league, and it seemed like that was the case again here tonight. But, you know, we know that the Dallas Stars have been a team that has focused more on defense than offense in the past. And all of a sudden, they look like a team that is able to put up a little bit more offense to their game. I think this is a great case study, seeing the Winnipeg Jets play the Dallas Stars, because Dallas is a team that is trying to change, just like the Winnipeg Jets are under a new head coach. And I think what you're looking for from the Winnipeg Jets is more of a defensive game while maintaining and holding on to that offensive game that we know they're so capable of, and trying to get to kind of the results that we're seeing from the Dallas Stars here. Whereas the Dallas Stars, I think what they were trying to gain here as the year goes on, or what they were trying to do in training camp, was to try and hold on to that defense they've been able to play, and then build in that offense as they went along. Early reviews, small sample size, as Ken is sure to tell you when he hops on here, and he's right to say that. But it looks like out of the gates, the Dallas Stars are achieving everything they've looked to achieve. The Winnipeg Jets will dig into this topic a little bit more, but at times showing flashes, I think, of the team that Rick Bowness and his coaching staff wants them to be, but also showing a lot of flashes of the team that they used to be and who they are trying to evolve from. We'll get a take on it from Kenny on this. Best way to do that is to play his entry music, so here we go. Kenny, my friend, you are looking dapper as always. You're actually making me feel a little dressed down here. Maybe I should have put something a little nicer on. But, I mean, hey, I'm in a hotel room in Denver as I get prepared for the Wednesday night hockey game between the Stanley Cup champ Colorado Avalanche and the Winnipeg Jets. You're going to be joining me here soon enough. I promise you I will be looking sharp when it comes to Wednesday. I've got one of my Vittorio Rossi suits that Frank hooked me up with that I'll be busting out for that night. It's sitting right in the suitcase right here beside me. Can't wait to show it off for everybody, because as we know, Frank, he's the best. He's the best that we got going at Vittorio Rossi, and we're so happy to have them on as a sponsor of our podcast. I just want you to know, if you want to look sharp, the best place to go do it in Winnipeg is to Vittorio Rossi. Go ask for Frank and the boys. They'll take care of you. And make sure, if you do head there, make sure you tell them Kenny and Renny sent you. That's important. We want them to know that that people from our group, from the Kenny and Renny group, from the Kenny and Renny family, are supporting the people who are supporting those conversations. So let them know Kenny and Renny sent you. Ken, out of the gate, initial thoughts on that game.
Yeah, interesting, Sean. Obviously, the Jets had a strong first period. At least the first 3 quarters of the period, I would say, it was fairly even, but they came out of the gate pretty sharp. But structure, a little bit kind of scrambly in the second period, and the Jets really just never found an answer in the third, I would say. I like what you said in the opening. The Stars are no longer a one-line hockey team. The addition of Mason Marchment, who we both discussed as one of those great options for the Winnipeg Jets to pursue. Not only did he not end up with the Jets, he ended up in the division, and man, what a start he's had. 3 goals, 2 assists now in his first 3 games here with the Stars. He's fit in extremely well. The Stars are incredibly happy with what he's brought to the table. And the Jets just never found an answer. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, obviously we're looking at every single thing. We're trying to dissect the minutia. And yeah, I mean, as I like to say, I mean, I didn't want to overreact after game 1, and I'm certainly not going to overreact after game 2. The Jets need to get into a rhythm. They have not played, they played 2 games so far. I don't think that they're stuck in last year. I don't think that they've totally turned the page and figured out, the way they're going to play in a fast system and that aggressive system quite yet. They have an incredibly difficult week. They play the Dallas Stars, they play the Colorado Avalanche, they play the Vegas Golden Knights, and they play the Toronto Maple Leafs. So even though Toronto had a tough go against Arizona this evening. So we're going to know more after 5 games than we know after 2 games. But what we know so far is that it's a work in progress. It's also a work in progress for the Dallas Stars. That's what Pete DeBoer told us this morning. I would say that there's plenty to improve on. It's both, Adam Lowry and Josh Morrissey were quick to say it's a learning experience. The Jets have things to learn from this effort. They were not able to sustain their really hot start. And part of the reason was that, their aim and objective is to play fast. And the Jets did not play fast. And because the Dallas Stars played in a way that didn't allow them to play fast. So puck management was once again an issue. And I just don't think the Jets made life difficult enough on Jay Cottinger. I mean, as you said, he's one of the best goalies in the entire National Hockey League. And the Jets just didn't get a ton of traffic. They didn't have a lot of sustained pressure. Special teams kind of let them down at certain points in the game as well, I would say. And Dallas was more a physical team in this game, and they played well in the dirty areas, and the Jets didn't really have a whole lot of answers for that part of the game either. It'll be interesting. I mean, how do they respond, right? I mean, they had a couple days after their first win. Now they're going to take tomorrow off, and they'll be back on the ice Wednesday against the defending champions, and they will be in for a stiff test. And Adam Lowry said, I mean, if you don't control, if you're not good with the puck in transition against Colorado, Sean, we saw it live and in person. I mean, what's going to happen if you don't control the puck against that team. It can be a long night for the opposition.
Yeah.
So overall, the Jets weren't good enough today. They know they weren't good enough. Now it's about finding out how they respond against who we believe is one of the best teams in the NHL, if not the best team.
That was a good first trip to the buffet. I gotta say, I love this comment from Frishy101 who says, "Oh, we suck again." I'm surprised, Ken. One, I'm surprised at the optimism of the chat room after game 1, and I'm surprised at the pessimism of the chat room after game 2 here. And you know what? Hey, you know me. One of the things I absolutely love about this show and what we do here is the access fans have to call us out, to go after us. And I know after the last game, I'd said, let's pump the brakes here. This was a New York Rangers team who I thought was tired. They were coming in playing the next night. People did not agree with me. I did notice after the game, Ken, that the Rangers coach said exactly that he felt his team ran out of gas. So
hey, hang on a second.
Right?
What would you say if Paul Maurice said that to you after game 3 of the season? What would you have said then?
Game 3 of the season, listen, this is science. It's rest.
Buddy,
recovery.
come on.
It's rest.
Come on.
Recovery. What are you talking about? Come on. Listen, which of the two of us has a degree in kinesiology, Ken?
Not me. I don't know what you have. I don't know what you have.
University of Manitoba, baby. But I wanted to bring this up. I think this is hilarious. I love when the fans take runs at us. So every once in a while, the fans have to be ready for us to take a run at them. And I'm calling out my boy Stonewall Dave here, who says my Jets optimism lasted 5 periods into the new season. Honestly, better than I expected. Stonewall Dave was one of the people who was taking me to task after the last game because he thought I was being too pessimistic by pointing out that the Rangers were playing back-to-back and should be tired. I think it's funny, but at the same time, keep it coming, people. We love this kind of stuff. Ken, let's get into this. I want to know your lamplighter of the game, and let's make it clear here. Oh, you know what? Before we do that, I want to give away.
Well, I texted you. We got the name here. We got the name.
Yeah. Oh, you got the name?
Yeah, buddy.
Give away our first TCB, Trans-Canada Brewing 8-pack of Lamplighter Amber Ale. It is going to Russell Lowen, who gave us his Lamplighter of the game last game. And all you have to do is tell us what he thought the best goal of the game was. And now he's got himself a case of sweet, delicious Lamplighter Amber Ale from our friends at Trans-Canada Brewing. It's as simple as that, people. You can do it in the comments here. You can direct message us. I know some people had problems getting through to us. We took care of that. We've opened up the DMs so that everyone can get a hold of us here. There you go, Russ. Good job, buddy. Keep it coming, everybody. For a chance, just let us know what your Lamplighter of the game is. That clearly means, the best goal of the game that we saw. Ken, you don't have to stick with the Winnipeg Jets here. You can, which is going to narrow things down for you if you want to take the easy route out here. But Ken, what's your Lamplighter of the game?
Yeah, I mean, it has nothing to do with the fact that there was only one Jets goal, but I'm sorry, the play that Kyle Connor made to create the spacing required to get the lane for Mark Scheifele to absolutely blister a one-timer past Jake Ottinger is my Lamplighter of the game. For the Jets, they did not generate nearly enough after that goal, but that is a one-timer beauty, an incredible zone entry. Great job by Josh Morrissey to create the speed up the wall by getting the puck over to Ehlers, who chipped it to Kyle Connor. Connor with the incredible speed through the neutral zone did a nice job of creating the spacing in order to allow that lane to happen. And man, he just absolutely wired a slap shot over the glove side of Jake Ottinger. It was a beautiful goal, and that is the Lamplighter of the game.
You know what the beauty of that goal is, Ken? We were talking a little bit about it off air, but the defender who's on Mark Scheifele at that time has no idea how much trouble he's in, right? Like, he's collapsing towards the net, and he's just thinking, everything's fine. I'm in between my guy and the net. And Mark Scheifele, he's doing exactly what Mark Scheifele wants him to do. Mark Scheifele isn't driving the net. And we've talked about this before. And I have to say, I'm glad that the Winnipeg Jets and that top line has kept that element involved in that line, the ability to kind of create space for themselves. And I've talked about this before. Mark Scheifele, he skates really hard to the net so that the defender starts backing up. And as soon as he gets that defender on his back feet, on his heels, he pops back out and is wide open for the one-timer. And boy, Mark Scheifele is feeling it to start this season. 3 goals in his first 2 games. That was absolutely beautiful. Well worthy, Ken. I know I was giving you a hard time, but well worthy of the Lamplighter of the game. And hey, once again, everyone out there, give us a heads up. What's your Lamplighter of the game? However you want to get a hold of us, whether you want to do it in the chat room here, whether you want to send us, leave the messages on our YouTube channel, send us direct messages to our Twitter handles where you see it's at Weeb's World for Ken and at SN Sean Reynolds for me. And you, like Russ, could have a nice tasty 8-pack of Lamplighter Lager by the end of the or by next. So the way we're going to do this is we'll give you right up until the day of the next game. So you got today and you got tomorrow to tell us what your Lamplighter is. Thank you so much to our friends at Trans-Canada Brewing. So happy to have them on board here. Love these graphics that I send us here. And Ken, I think you saw earlier on, they threw one of these out with the Kenny and Renny logo on it. I didn't think you could improve on this. I think they've perfected it. But yeah, if you haven't been down to Trans-Canada Brewing Company, go check them out at their tap room at 1290 Kenniston. Just an unbelievable space. And you know what? You may want to try that pizza. We went for a meeting. We had some of that pizza, Ken. Oh my goodness, was that good stuff. Okay. All right. Moving on. Here's something I thought was interesting, Ken. When the dam did break and the Jets started allowing goals, I noticed something very similar with the goals. It really did seem like the Jets were a little bit discombobulated in their own zone. A lot of the goals seemed to be them like trying to race out and find their guys. And I do have to say, I thought that the Dallas Stars looked a little bit like the Winnipeg Jets do, confusing defenders in their own zone and then finding that quiet ice and getting suddenly that pass comes from across the ice and boom, it's in the back of the net. How did the Dallas Stars pull that off? Was that creative genius on the part of the Dallas Stars, or was that defensive zone breakdowns by the Winnipeg Jets?
Yeah, kind of combination of both. I think that the Stars, were just creating a little bit more havoc for the Jets when they got the 2 goals in succession there, especially on the second one. I mean, obviously the Jets were running around a little bit in their own end. I mean, obviously the puck went up the boards to Kyle Connor. Really nice job of pinching down by the defender. They had a couple other chances, and then they kind of just had trouble identifying who they should have tried to pick up, and it got a little bit, as you said, discombobulated is a great word to use, and the Jets didn't ever find their guy. And then, the Kivy ran to one-timer was a really nice play by Essa Lindell to get it across, but the Jets never really picked up who they needed to be covering. And that was a big play in the hockey game, and kind of allowed the Stars to get a whole lot of momentum. And again, it was a tough break. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck tried to bat the puck out of trouble, and then things just kind of got more scrambly after that. Obviously, a really nice setup by Marchment on the other goal in front. And I mean, Jets kind of let them back into the game by Tyler Seguin is a guy. We know, Sean, Tyler Seguin loves playing the Jets, right?
Yeah.
Loves it. Absolutely loves it. Okay, hang on a sec. I got the numbers earlier. I'm just going to double check here. That's his 28th goal and 51st point in 44 games against the Winnipeg Jets. And the majority of those came as a member of the Dallas Stars. He's just been absolutely excellent. And that was another big goal for them. And for the folks that didn't maybe see it or are listening on the old podcast later on, the surface is being changed over for basketball, so we still do have a little bit of the background noise. It's not as bad as the PA announcer getting ready for the Manitoba Moose game home opener, but we do have some activity in the background. It's not the leaf blower, but I'm going to show you one more time if you didn't see it, folks. We got incredible turnover here down on the ice level. It's almost basketball season. Incredible job switching over the American Airlines Center, but we'll dig in a little bit more. But let's go to the next before we get into some of the lineup. Craig Zamzo, one of our regulars here. We're gonna get to Craig in a minute here, in a few seconds. But let's get to the Johnston Group read, and then we'll dig from there.
That's our other play of the game that we're looking for. Of course, we want you. It's the got you covered play of the game, as presented by Johnston Group, which is a play that is, along the lines, great save, great defensive player, or maybe if you go and you allow a goal, guy pops back the other way, scores to get you back in the game. Anything that kind of helps bail someone out. That's to you too, Ken. What was your got you covered Johnston Group play of the game?
Yeah, it's interesting, Sean. I mean, I don't think there were a ton of plays on the ice. I mean, in the first period, there were a couple of really nice examples of back checking and back pressure from Mark Scheifele. But I'm going to go a little bit off the board here with the got you covered play of the game. I think it came afterward in the room after the game was over. Adam Lowry, to my question about how the momentum turned in the second period, he said, I take that penalty in the neutral zone and they get some good chances and they score coming out of that. To me, what did we talk about all last year? Accountability. So to me, a guy that has a letter on his jersey this year for the first time on a regular basis took some accountability. It was obviously a team thing, but Adam pointed inward. He didn't like taking the penalty in the neutral zone, and he didn't like the fact that the Stars were able to, I believe, score the go-ahead goal. Yes, they did kill off the minor, but they never really got settled, and they sort of got the momentum sort of stolen coming out of that. So that's what I'm going to choose as my got you covered play of the game. Because of what we talked about going into the year, accountability, so important for this group. I saw that was a great example of accountability by an important member of the leadership core, and that's why I chose the play today.
Ken, I absolutely love that play of the game. You took it out of the box, and I think you absolutely nailed it with that one. That's a great Johnston Group play of the game. And of course, we want to give a shout out to the Kenny and Renny OGs, our friends at the Johnston Group. You won't find two businesses with the same challenges, but you will find 30,000 businesses with Chambers Plan employee benefits, proudly administered by our friends at Johnston Group. Chambers Plan is Canada's #1 plan for employee benefits because it evolves with the way you work and live. The plan is run as a not-for-profit designed specifically to support small businesses, and its unique pooling strategy keeps rates stable so you won't have any surprises at your next renewal. Chambers Plan now comes with professional consulting on key financial, legal, and HR issues, and Teledoc telemedicine services are included with every health option. See how Chambers Plan can benefit your business by visiting chamberplan.ca. just absolutely love dealing with the Johnson Group boys. I love the Kenny and Renny OGs. I absolutely love that. Let's talk a little bit about Hellebuyck here. How did you think his night was? Is this a night where he was maybe not at the top of his game after we gave him so much credit for what he did in that first night of the season against the New York Rangers? Or was this an example of his team just not being there in front of him?
Yeah, Sean, for me, I thought that Hellebuyck was fine. I mean, a couple of them were screened. They were self-screens, I believe. There's a self-screen, I think, by Logan Stanley. And the second one was tough to tell if it was Brendan Dillon or Jamie Benn in the high slot that actually caused the bigger issue on the Heiskanen slap shot goal on the power play. So to me, I didn't mind Hellebuyck's game. Was he as sharp as he was Friday? No, but I would argue this, Sean. If Hellebuyck wasn't as sharp as he was in the first two periods, the game would have been 6-1. They weren't really in the game without Hellebuyck kind of standing tall. I mean, I didn't have an issue with the goals that were scored other than what was happening in front of Connor Hellebuyck, to be quite frank. So, I mean, I'd have to look at the goals saved above average, but I didn't see any muffins happening. I didn't see any muffins happening out there, that's for sure.
No doubt.
I saw bad breakdowns, and I saw a team that needed to be much better in front of him. And hey, it's an interesting week, Sean. Like, the Jets are playing, as we said, Colorado Wednesday, Vegas Thursday. I mean, David Riddick, we would expect, is going to be getting a game probably on Thursday against Vegas. So that means Connor Hellebuyck is going to be, he wants to be between the pipes against the Stanley Cup champions. So, I mean, the Jets are going to need to play a lot better. And, again, I don't have any issue with how Hellebuyck played today. And honestly, I thought he kept them in the game longer than the Jets maybe deserved to be based on how the Stars kind of turned the game on its head during the second period.
Well, that would be 2 games in a row, if you ask me. Here's something interesting. I was having a conversation with our friend North End Rick the other day, and I don't think he has a very optimistic point of view on what he thinks the Jets are going to do to start out this season. I had them going, and I only bring this up because you were talking about the tough schedule that they have starting out here, right? Like that Rangers was a tough start, although they win that one. This one, I think at some point you and I, and we should talk about this. I know people don't love talking about anyone other than the Jets, but the Dallas Stars are a team that the Jets are just going to keep bumping into. So I think we do have to have a conversation about what they look like they've become, especially because, like I was saying off the top of the podcast, we know what they're trying to become. They're trying to become the same old defensively stingy Dallas Stars with that offensive edge that they look like they've found. And the Jets are trying to be that same old offensively dangerous team, but add in some stingy defense. So they're both kind of trying to do the same thing, but in opposite directions. And it sure looks like the Dallas Stars have arrived there first. But to get back to my original point, big tough matchup now coming up next against the Stanley Cup champs, and a pretty tough schedule to start the year compared to last year, which, if you remember, their schedule to start the year was a bit of a cakewalk. I had the Jets going 5-4-1 in the first 10 games. Maybe it's an unfair question to ask you right now, but can you give me an idea where you feel the Jets will be after the first 10 games of the year?
I would say if they're somewhere around that 500 mark, it's probably, I would say that would be considered a success based on the level of opponent that they'll be facing. I mean, the Jets were 9-3-3 coming out of the gate last year through 15. I believe it was their best start in 2.0 history.
Yeah.
I would say you're right. They probably had a little bit easier schedule coming out of the gate. There's no doubt about that. They've got 2 back-to-backs in the first 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 games. So, I mean, that's already a challenge. So, I mean, if they're around the 500 mark, but to me, it's more about how they play in that stretch of time. Obviously, they're going to take some time to get their feet underneath them. I mean, Blake Wheeler was asked this morning how he felt the team was adjusting and adapting. He thought that he saw some positive signs, and there have been positive signs, but we do know it's going to take some time for the group to get fully, they're invested in trying to play that way, but it's going to take a while before it becomes instinctual and becomes a habit. So I would say, the first 10 games are going to tell us a good chunk of what we don't know right now, and I would say by the end of the first quarter of the season, we're going to know where the Jets are in the process, right? I mean, everything that we saw during the preseason led you to believe that this is a group that's been listening, they've been attentive, they've been doing their best to observe what the way their coaches want them to play. But there's two teams on the ice every night, and they're both trying to get you out of your game and play the other team's game. So today the Stars were a little bit more effective in playing the kind of game that they wanted. To your point about how their team looks, I mean, Miro Heiskanen is a guy who's going to be in the Norris discussion. I mean, that's the kind of player that he is. I mean, the Jets did a good job of containing that top line of Pavelski and Rope Hintz and Jason Robertson, but they still gave up 4 and lost 4-1. So, I mean, sometimes you play well enough and sometimes you don't play well enough. And to me, it's a results-based business. So you've got to get results. But I mean, again, I think that this is going to be a continual. We've said this for years. The Jets aren't suddenly going to go from needing to be way better defensively to being a defensive juggernaut in 5, 10, 15, 20 games. I mean, it's going to take longer than that. But how long it's going to take, that's what we're going to find out. And how long it's going to take is going to determine if the Jets where the Jets are going to stand in terms of the race in the Central. Because what we've seen so far, outside of a tough start for the Minnesota Wild, is that the Central's pretty good. They're not just a top-heavy team. They've got a lot of teams who believe that they're in the mix. And, over time, Pete DeBoer talked about it in the morning. I mean, the margins are so razor thin, you cannot afford a lengthy losing streak. So it's one thing to say, oh, well, you're playing tough teams. Well, the Jets can't afford to be dropping 3 or 4 games in a row in the first 10 games because it creates a deficit that is hard to overcome over the course of the season. So we'll see. I mean, like I said, it's only 2 games. We're going to learn a lot more by the end of, let's say, by the end of Saturday. But then the Jets will play the St. Louis Blues again right out of that on Monday. So they're gonna learn a lot because they're going to see a lot of these Central Division teams early.
You know what? It's funny you bring up the Minnesota Wild, and I think, tough start, like crazy tough start, especially defensively. But I mean, I'm not willing to count them out yet. Although the one thing that I do think is interesting is that they had one of those playoffs last year where I think there was a real belief that the Minnesota Wild could do something and get out of that first round. And when it didn't happen, I think that there can be like a little bit of emotional, maybe mental damage that happens in situations like that. And that's a team that maybe could have happened to. I don't know if that explains what's happening there. I know there's a little bit of turnover, and I know that they had to move on. Sent to LA. Is that Kevin Fiala?
Fiala.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big loss. That's a huge loss for them.
Oh, massive. So yes.
I know they've got Matt Boldy coming in, and that guy looks like he's going to be a real stud. And they also have who's the kid who got taken? Marco Rossi.
Yeah, I think he might have been healthy tonight, though. I think he was a healthy scratch, I believe.
Yeah,
they've given up 20 goals in 3 games, Sean. I mean, that's nobody had that. Nobody had that on the bingo card so far.
Well, especially after what they, what the funny part about that is they locked up Fleury. When I think there was a lot of other teams that were like, like it was like chum in the water, and the Sharks were there, and everyone wanted to pounce and get Marc-Andre Fleury, and they locked him down. And I heard he got the Bronx cheer for stopping a dumping the other day. So tough times already. When you're getting the Bronx cheer in Game 2, the fans definitely don't like what they're seeing, and when you're getting those kind of numbers, 20 goals in 3 games, that's definitely going to add up quick. Hey, let's we haven't done this yet this year. It's only the second show of the year. Let's get at it. We want to bring Scott Billick in, who is also with you down in Dallas. Are you getting him there, Ken? Do you see him? Let's try it again. For some
I do
reason,
see him. Yeah.
What?
I see him. Here, tilt your screen down here. The sun, the light is bad. Tilt your screen down a little.
Jesus, man. I mean, I don't know what you
I'm not getting him, Ken. I don't think Scott, you're going to need to move to a place with better Wi-Fi. I want to dig into this a little bit more. We were talking about it with the Dallas Stars trying to become a more offensive team. It looks like they're pulling it off. I think they've got about 14 goals in their first 3 games, and they've only allowed 3 goals in their first 3 games. So they've gotten the mix down at least to start the season. We know the Jets are trying to become a more defensive team. Worked in Game 1 where they only allowed 1 game. Clearly didn't work here this evening. Which of those two do you think is harder to do, Ken? To take a team and add a defensive element to it, or take a team and add and try and elicit more offense from them?
Yeah, it depends what your identity is. I mean, to me, the Stars had trouble scoring goals they have had trouble scoring goals for a long time. So I would also say the Jets have had trouble defending for a long time. So I would actually argue that it's probably equally. I'm not sure it's harder on either side. I think it's the same level of toughness depending on the buy-in. But what we've seen so far is that there's the level of buy-in is there on both teams. It just happens to be going a little bit better for one team other than the other so far. But that's, again, also personnel-based. I mean, the Stars went out and added some pieces that can help them. I mean, the Jets think they've added some players that can help them defend as well. But I would also say that the spreading of the wings for Miro Heiskanen is also, when you're trying to score more and you have a guy that can not only help your number one power play, but has the green light to go and can not only help the rush but lead the rush.
Great take.
It makes a big difference. I mean, that to me is a situation where that's probably why right now Dallas is a little bit more ahead of the game in terms of where they're trying to get to.
The Merle called it here. Scotty was rejected. He wasn't Kenny and Renny grade in that last spot he was in, but I think he's fixed it now. Good to see Scotty joining the show here. Scotty, have you got over? You're still a little choppy. I think you need to find. Seriously, I think you need to find.
You want me to sit on Kenny's lap?
Okay, we got you now. All
right.
Scotty, you hit up any good barbecue since you've been down there?
I hated myself last night, Ken or Shawnee. I just hated myself after eating it. It was a Terry Black's, unbelievable food.
Have you made it to Pecan Lodge there?
No, we were in line for it. And then we're so it's funny. Me and Mike went. Kenny was, I don't know, celebrating getting hired by Sportsnet again as usual. And so I can see him just his head's going red. So we were gonna go, and both of our Uber drivers said don't go to Pecan Lodge, go to Terry Black's. And I don't know the difference between the two. They said it's basically 6.5, whatever that saying is. And but anyways, it was unbelievable. I mean, I think I tweeted out the plate of food. People have been asking me about it. I hated myself for the rest of the night. It was but it was good. And then Kenny took us to some Mexican place for lunch today. If you're ever on the road with Kenny, just ask to go. And this guy's got it all. Big props to Kenny for knowing everywhere to eat. So
yeah, Ken is like me, and this is the interesting part: is we've only got on the road in so many places together. But Ken and I both researched the heck out of this, and I've noticed there's a lot of different places we go to in different cities. So there's going to have to be a Kenny and Renny kind of cook off, or where when we get out on the road, there you go, food wars. When we get out, and it's Kenny and I. If you're down there, if Mikey's down there, if the boys are down there, we'll have to do one night. We'll go one place, one night we'll go to the other place, and then there will be votes on who's got the better recommendations.
We'll get a belt.
Going on there.
We'll get a belt. Kenny won't want to lose that belt.
Right. Scotty, I'm interested in this idea of the first, before we get into, I don't even want to talk about the Dallas Stars right now.
Sure.
I saw your tweet earlier on, and you talked about the old Winnipeg Jets coming up. I'm not even sure we can say that there's a new Winnipeg Jets, because what I saw was what I can see definitively is I think the first period of game one is exactly what the Winnipeg Jets are trying to be. But one period does not make a new team. Where do you think the Jets are at in their effort to, leave behind the issues of the past and adopt a new principle going forward?
Well, it's funny because I was listening to your show, as I always do, last night on Friday night. And you were saying, right? It was the first period was more the future. The second period was the past. And the third period was kind of where they want to be, or not where they want to be, but where they are. And that's who they are, kind of this team in transition. I think you saw a bit of that team, the future of the team early on, but it faded quick. So that Sagan goal kind of, I think Adam Lowry and both Scar and Neil kind of talked about the second period, but that Sagan goal, and it was midway through the second period or the first period. To me, that was old Jets. Why is Tyler Sagan wide open? 5-on-5 behind both of your defenders, right?
I'm not wrong. That's Pierre-Luc Dubois letting his guy go, right?
I agree, but it's just the awareness, right? The overall awareness of this Jets team was just not there. So but and then the second and third periods were, maybe the third was, slightly better, and I think even 5-on-5, like both teams are relatively even. But it just, special teams was a killer for this team tonight. They looked slow on the power play, and that was a big problem last season. It was a slow moving power play night like that again. It seemed like they were just kind of getting hemmed in. It was difficult to clear pucks out. They weren't moving like against the Rangers. I thought they did really well. So it isn't just all that stuff. It was like, well detailed, zone exits that this team had. One, maybe two passes to get out into the neutral zone, and they were flying in that Rangers game. Granted, the Rangers are coming in 3 of 4 on a back-to-back as well. So I don't know. I mean, you asked the question. I mean, where, what is this Jets team? It's hard to say, right? Like the New York Rangers game, they look pretty good, minus the second period, and then they come out tonight and they don't look very good at all. They almost look like game 60 of last season. It wasn't good. So it's going to be. And again, how much do you put stock in any of these games right now? You want to see improvements. I think you have in some cases. But now you got to go into Colorado and Vegas on a back-to-back, defending Stanley Cup champions. The team that's been there, the kind of the pretender to the throne in Vegas there. That's also a good team, much improved from last season, not nearly as injured. I don't know. I mean, you're going to see what the Jets can kind of maybe withstand over these two games, but it's going to be difficult to win them, especially if they play like they did tonight.
I've got a question for both of you. In the process of trying to carve out a new identity, it would be my take that in the effort to carve out a new identity, the Jets, I think, very much know who they want to be, right? Again, I think it was kind of like in that first game against the New York Rangers, they came out in that first period and they did everything that their coach was asking of them and saying that they wanted them to be, right? But what happened, I thought, after that was once they got challenged, right? Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, is the saying, right? I think they got punched in the mouth a little bit and then they fell out of that structure. So I guess there's a difference between knowing what you want to be and, being able to be that without getting knocked out of that identity, being able to claim that identity. Clearly, the Jets haven't claimed the identity that Rick Bowness wants them to claim at this stage. But I wonder, in the meantime, until they get there, if they can get there, but in the meantime, does that make them a fragile team? Ken, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I don't believe it makes them as fragile team. I mean, what we're going to find out, though, this week is, can they stick to the original plan and stay in structure against some high-end offensive teams? I mean, the Dallas Stars are an improving offensive team, but they're about to play one of the best offensive teams in the NHL on Wednesday. The demise of Vegas has greatly been exaggerated so far, and even though the Leafs have been struggling out of the gate here a little bit, they still have some incredible offensive weaponry. So, as you mentioned, Sean, I mean, the punching in the mouth part isn't necessarily a physical hit or being punched in the mouth. It's giving up goals. Can you stay within your structure and not chase the game and, toss out your core values? That's what we're going to find out. I mean, it's going to take some... Laying the foundation is often the hardest part when you're going to especially early in the year where teams are trying to find structure. It's very difficult in order to do that. So I didn't see the Jets respond well enough on those regards today. Their power play kind of let them down, as Scott mentioned. The bigger issue for me is that they just didn't make life difficult for Jake Ottinger. I mean, this guy's an elite goalie. If he can see it, he's going to stop it. So this goes back to the argument we had, or not argument, the discussions, the debate.
It was an argument.
Last year, the Jets didn't do a good enough job getting to the blue paint. I mean, today they spent a lot of their time on the periphery again, I believe. And the other thing, Sean, we talked about it off air. I want to get into it right now. I mean, right now the Jets don't want to be a one-line hockey team, but right now almost all of their offense is coming from the first line. Their fourth line got an incredibly important goal last game, which was the game winner. But what we talked about going into the year, in order for the Jets to be successful, even if that top line can score somewhere between 105 and 120 goals, they need more from other areas. And they haven't had enough from those areas. Like I said, it's early, and I'm not here to condemn those players right now, but the complementary scoring hasn't been there enough so far. Having said that, the Jets have scored 5 goals. I get it. I mean, there hasn't been enough total offense, but we didn't see very much in terms of offense from that second line today. And the third line, which I thought was pretty good in game 1, they didn't generate a whole lot. Morgan Barron had a great burst on the breakaway. He kind of pulled away from the defender, but they didn't have as many dangerous shifts today. I didn't find. And again, we talked about. I like Cole. I love everything that Cole Perfetti brings to the table. Right now, he got hammered again from behind again, and it didn't seem like he didn't have his legs today. And for a guy that relies on the hockey intelligence and hockey sense, that line just seemed disjointed to me. And I'm not blaming Perfetti at all. But Sean, this is an early case of the receipts for me. This is why it's going to be hard for him to be a 50-point player. It's hard to get that level of production at 20 years old. And so far, that line didn't generate enough. I mean, Wheeler had the most shot attempts for the line as a whole, but I think 1 attempt for Cole Perfetti. They had Pierre-Luc Dubois had 2 shots on goal, 5 missed shots. Blake Wheeler had 2 shots on goal, 5 shot attempts. And again, I'm not pointing the finger at that second line, but that second line needs to produce. Otherwise, Rick Bowness and Scott Arniel are going to have to get to the point where they consider trying to diversify the offense and put Dubois back with Kyle Connor, because Kyle Connor and Dubois had great chemistry last year. So we know that their top line wants to stay together, but if these guys don't get it going in the first 10 or 20 games, they're going to have to consider some alternatives in terms of how they roll out their lines. Scott and I were talking. David Gustafson had a really good start to the game, but that fourth line didn't get a lot going. And they didn't play a ton. I get it. Yeah. But that fourth line is going to need to be, as Paul Marie's saying, they have to do more than just tread water. And today, I think, to be honest, quite frankly, all 4 lines didn't do much other than tread water, other than that early goal from Mark Scheifele.
I know he took it in a little bit in a different direction, but I want to back it up and ask you that question, Scott. Do you think what we've seen so far from the Winnipeg Jets, and here's what I'll coach it. The second period against the New York Rangers, or maybe even the last 10 minutes of the first period, and then the second period, and then I'd say almost the first 10 minutes of the third period, and then what we saw tonight. Do you see it as an example of this Jets team being fragile at the moment?
No, I see it as I think this team is just caught in between kind of 2 worlds. They're trying to not be, and Rick Bowness has alluded to this. They're trying not to fall into their old habits. They're trying to follow a new system, and when it doesn't work, they kind of fall into the void of the middle of it's part of one. It's one part of part A and a part of part B, and it just, it doesn't work, right? I mean, I agree with Rick Bowness when he says this is a work in progress, right? Like, I think it's not unrealistic to say, or not unreasonable to say, like, this team is really trying to get rid of some, like, well-worn, I don't even know if you want to call them scars or whatever. I'm probably it's too much hyperbole, but like, this is a team that's just, it's so set in 8 years of Paul Maurice and trying to, rely on spurts of offense and all that stuff. This is a team that's now trying to be on 100%, full 60 minutes, like always on, forechecking hard all of the time. And when they fall behind like they do, or they give up a goal like the Sagan goal, I think those are still deflating for a team like this. And then it becomes, can they get back to the structure, as you or Kenny alluded to, or both of you even. And I don't know if they have that full capability yet. I saw some tweets tonight. It's like, well, how do you expect this team to be any better with the same personnel? Well, I think we've seen at times this team be better when they are playing with the same personnel, but within their new structure, within their new system, being hard on the forecheck, 4-man attack, 5-man attack at times, when they stick to that. But again, when they get away from it, but I don't think that they're a fragile team as much as they're just a team that's kind of caught between trying to do one thing and not trying to do another. And sometimes it just becomes too problematic to do one or the other, or it just may be confusing. And I don't think they're confused in what they need to do, but it's just like, it's like any bad habit, right? If something happens that kind of gets in the way of it, you kind of fall back into your old ways at times, and then you're trying to like, well, I'm making a mistake here, and I want to do this, but I'm not doing this, and I don't know. I mean, it's something to ask the
indecision. It's indecision, right?
That's exactly right. And so, and then when you get stuck in that indecision for a while, I think that's what you see in these second periods and the later half of the first and the front half of the thirds, whatever you want to call it, where they're just trying to figure out how to get back, how to grasp that. And I think when Rick Bowness says that's a work in progress, that's something they have to be obtained. Is this trying to put too much of an optimistic or positive spin on it? I don't know yet. We're through 2 games. The Jets are 1-1. I mean, that's the hard thing, right? It's hard to make definitive statements about this team, but you do see it, right? Like you do see the Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of this team at times, where they're trying to do the thing. But you used to see that all the time under Paul Maurice too. But I think this team now knows what it needs to do to be successful and how to stay that way. I just don't think they're there yet to doing it 100% of the time. And I don't know how long that takes. And so I think, as they say, there's going to be some growing pains. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing in some of these games early on, where it is tough to it's tough to grow, and it's tough to become a different team. And it's tough to do it in 3 weeks of training camp and then just get thrown sort of to the wolves, especially with this sort of gauntlet of a schedule they have out of the gate. I mean, you're playing some of the hardest teams in the NHL who have been playing the way that you want to play for a long time already, where the Jets are just starting to kind of play a certain style of play that's going to – I mean, the Jets are playing against a Rick Bowness team tonight. I mean, essentially, Peter DeBoer has come in. But even Peter DeBoer said this morning that Rick Bowness laid the foundation for what how this team plays like, right? So you look at that. I mean, the Jets are trying to be the Dallas Stars in the way that they play, essentially. But again, Rick Bowness had the better part of 2 years to a couple years or a year at least as an assistant coach, kind of starting to pave that way. Not saying it's going to take 2.5 years. This is where the stars are. But there are going to be times where it's going to take some time to do. It's going to take some time to get there, and 2 games into an 82-game schedule. I mean, obviously it's not there yet. But predictably, I guess, is the more important thing. It's not there yet, and I don't think anybody should think that this team is going up against and playing the Dallas Stars or the Avalanche or the Vegas Golden Knights in the same way as they might do halfway through the season or even into next season.
Scotty, you've officially taken over the buffet. I smell the great says.
I'm a fat boy, boys. I mean, I like to eat, and I mean,
you like to talk. Hey, one thing that you said that I really, really do like, or thought was like bang on, is the whole Jekyll and Hyde nature of this team. They were such a tough team to figure out last year because you'd see the flashes of what they were capable of, and then you'd see the flashes of what they were incapable of. And unfortunately, the incapable came out more often last year than the capable. And that's the one thing that I think is just a little bit concerning, is because I wonder how much of that has to do with, the indecision that you're talking about. But I wonder how much of that has, this is an interesting conversation by Rick Bowness, how he talked in the offseason about when you're a team like the Winnipeg Jets and you fall out of the playoffs, it's important to kind of get back up as quick as you can and get back in, because otherwise that it starts seeping into your DNA. And I wonder about that Jekyll and Hyde nature, about the Jets going out and doing the things that they need to do to win a game on one night and then the next night kind of laying an egg. It's early. We all know that this is an early sample size, so no one can say this definitively. I'm not saying this definitively, but the fact that we saw that Jekyll and Hyde nature last year, and we've seen that in the first 2 games of this season, that worries me that the possibility of that having seeped into the team's DNA may be a very real thing. Craig Zamzow talked earlier, and Ken wants to handle this question. What Jets come out of the lineup for Wednesday versus the Avs? Take it, Kenny.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Scott Arniel already kind of touched on it after the morning skate that, with the 4 games in the week, the Jets are wanting to get some of these other players into the lineup. And I would say that Logan Stanley kind of opened the door for Scott Arniel and or Rick Bowness to give Dylan Sandberg a game on Wednesday night. Is it a tough ask to have a guy make his season debut against the Colorado Avalanche? Absolutely. But I would say that, the penalty on Stanley kind of got caught with his feet kind of in quicksand on the play. I mean, he actually got to the Ty Dellandrea at the right time, but he kind of hung on to him, and that's why the interference was called. Didn't do a good enough job kind of clearing the front of the net on one of the goals. I thought he made a really smart exit at one point. I think it was in the first period where he actually waited and made a nice exit pass, I think, to Adam Lowry. But, other than that, I didn't think that Stanley, again, what we talked about the whole time, the competition is ongoing. And through the first 2 games, Logan Stanley has done nothing to further separate himself from the competition. So to me, I would say the door is open for Dylan Sandberg to be inserted into the game on Wednesday. And then in terms of the forwards, I mean, we'll see. Obviously, Axel Jonsson Fialbi may have an opportunity. I don't know if it's Wednesday or if it's Thursday, but you probably expect some fresh legs to be inserted up front for one of those 2 games. We'll kind of see what happens, and then we'll just see what they decide. To me, one thing that I think has kind of stood out for me, even in the game that the Jets won on Friday, I don't think that the pairings, and again, I'm not saying use the blender up front or on the back end. I just don't think that these are the optimal defense pairings, at least from what I've seen. Sean, you know where I stand. I think that Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt are a better pairing together. And I think that if you're going to insert Dylan Sandberg, we saw some stretches last year with Pionk and Sandberg where they were very good together. So I would say that if that change is being made on the back end, I think it'd be a good time to try Schmidt and Dillon together and use Pionk with Sandberg. I think that Josh Morrissey has been the Jets' best defenseman through the first 2 games. There were a couple of hiccups for Dylan DeMello tonight, but, I mean, that's going to happen to everybody over the course of the year. I'm not saying blow up all 3 pairings. I know that they've had the best numbers together, best underlying numbers, so I'm not saying break up all 3 pairings, but I think if a change is made on the back end, I think I'd like to see, the Jets do that in terms of their pairings and run with that for a little while and see where it goes.
Well, let's dig a little bit deeper into that. I will say this. I think, Ken, I'm speaking for you and Scotty. I think we had this conversation. I was fairly in line with the cuts and the selections that were made by the Jets coaching staff. The one that we were kind of, from what I saw out there, I won't even speak for you guys. From what I saw, I didn't think Logan Stanley had won the 6th job. I thought Dylan Sandberg had, so it was a little bit surprising. We asked Rick Bowness, and he gave us his take on it. But I'm going to throw this. I know you touched on it slightly there, Weber, but let's give this one to Scotty, because Scotty's been feasting tonight, and this is one to feast because the chat room has been all over Logan Stanley. What are you seeing from him in his first couple games?
It's funny because you look at Logan Stanley's underlying numbers tonight, and they're glowing, right? Like, I mean, expected goals, possession numbers, like they're really good. But then you just look at, he can't win a foot race with Ty Dellandrea and takes an interference call. I believe that was in the first period. And then I think it was maybe the third that he took the slashing call. And those are killers. Like you can't, as a 6th defenseman, you cannot put your team down 5-on-3 and expect to stay in the lineup. I mean, that's just it. Logan Stanley hasn't shown enough. And like we said, this is part of the problem. This is part of the problem. Man, I'm getting, speaking of eating, you want me to eat? I mean, I got to eat those words. I mean, what to swear on your show here?
Don't lose focus.
But
keep it going.
But I just don't think so here's the thing. If the 6th line or if the 6th defensive job has always been this battle, well, it's time for somebody to step up to the front line and take over for a bit. And I think Dylan Sandberg's, that guy. I mean, he's sitting in the press box tonight. I'm watching him. I kind of look at, Stanley takes a penalty. I look over to see what Dylan Sandberg's not sitting there being like, big grin on his face or anything like that. But I think, that guy knows, like any athlete would know, that he can do better. And this is the difference, right? Like we talked about Dylan Sandberg being the safer option, maybe than Billy, and maybe again, and obviously against Logan. At this point, when this team is trying to transition into a different type of team, why not have the safer option in the lineup? He's a better penalty killer in my mind, Dylan Sandberg, and he makes smarter plays 5-on-5. And I think that's maybe the biggest thing, because Logan Stanley's penalties tonight, well, one of them was already on the PK, but that 5-on-5, like Dylan Sandberg's not losing that race with Tyler Dellandrea. And part of that is just like Dylan, I have a tough time. One, that Billy's not in the lineup, because I think he adds that speed element and the scoring element that they're missing. And I get that he has his other issues defensively and all that. But I mean, if you're going to keep Dylan Sandberg here, you can't just let him sit that much longer. And I think Dylan Sandberg, just by being here, needs to play. I mean, there's probably a case somewhere for Kyle Capobianco. I'm not going to make it because I don't believe it. But I think Dylan Sandberg needs to come in because he's more of a stalwart defensively. He makes less mistakes, and yeah, he had a tough playoffs with the Manitoba Moose last year. He didn't stand out like the other two didn't stand out during training camp. But his body of work last year in his 15 games, to me, showed that he could play. And then Kenny talked about playing with Pionk there. I mean, that was a good pairing for the team. It was kind of the defensive-minded guy in Sandberg, and Pionk obviously defensive-minded, but he could also push up into the play. I think you give Dylan Sandberg his chance, and I understand what it is with Logan Stanley. You want him to be more physical, and that's what one of the reasons why Rick Bowness said he was in the game. The only thing that his physicality led to tonight was a penalty for basically trying to maul the guy against the boards, and so he doesn't make the good enough hits. He's not really that physical when you watch him play. And then he doesn't really make the best decisions sometimes. And I don't know. I don't believe in the Logan Stanley kind of project anymore. I used to think that there was something there with him. And this is why I get all this Chara crap from everybody. But I think that's the reason why you take a gamble on a guy like that. But at the same time, when you have better prospects in the system, or even just better defensemen, for a team that's looking to, again, like I said, transition into something different, why not put the guys in there that actually can do the job better? And like you said, Logan Stanley didn't win the job. I don't think all three of us, none of us believe that. Nobody else really did either, but I think Dylan Sandberg's just a better all-around defenseman, and it's time for the Jets to just admit that and kind of move on from the Logan Stanley project.
You got any response to that, Ken?
No, I just think that it's time to, for someone else to get a chance in the competition. I mean, this is what we said. I mean, Logan Stanley kind of won the job by acclamation, I think, in a lot of ways, because none of the three players had a strong enough camp. And Rick Bowness and Scott Arneal and the coaching staff chose the guy that they thought could help them on the penalty kill. And there have been times where Logan Stanley does a good job on the penalty kill. But right now, I don't know that you're not getting a big enough bump on the penalty kill to have Stanley in over Dylan Sandberg at this time. And if Sandberg doesn't give the Jets what they think they need from him, then we'll be talking about another defenseman who's been in the chat room here. But I mean, I think that it's important to not have Ville Heinola on the yo-yo. I've said this before. The next time Heinola comes up, it should be for good. So when that time comes, we'll see. But right now, I think Dylan Sandberg deserves a chance to play, and I think that will come on Wednesday or Thursday. And I would be surprised if it doesn't come on Wednesday. But again, this isn't just about it's not Logan Stanley's fault the Jets lost today. I just don't think that there's been enough in the first two games. If as we said, the competition is ongoing, it's time to give someone else a spin and see if they can do a better job.
Interesting stuff. Scotty, really appreciate you joining us. Kenny, great takes as usual. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, TransCanada Brewing, Vittorio Rossi, and the Johnston Group, our Kenny and Renny OGs. And of course, I just want to say thank you to everyone in the chat room. The chat room was lit.
Heated. Heated.
Well, I go back to this. I feel like, and someone touched on it. I think T. Will touched on it. I think I've got a reputation as being a party pooper. Every time like people are, enjoying themselves, I'll go in and, party poop the whole thing there. I just think I'm a truth teller. I think that my take was a pretty balanced take last show, and I kind of felt like people jumped all over me for it.
I thought it was
So
great.
I was surprised. I was surprised to see how people turned and seemed to have entirely abandoned hope. It seems after this, what they didn't abandon was absolutely ripping the three of us, which we love when they do. Absolutely great stuff. Thank you to the chat room for keep being you, chat room. And like I said,
self-esteem, right?
yeah. And I just want to say again about TransCanada Brewing, Vittorio Rossi, and the Johnston Group, our sponsors. I've said this once. I'm going to say it every single time we have this show. If you appreciate these conversations happening in the city of Winnipeg and around the Winnipeg Jets, appreciate our sponsors, because they're the ones who are investing in these conversations happening. They wouldn't be happening without them. So thanks to them. Thanks to all you. Thank you, Scotty. Thank you, Kenny. We will see everybody on Wednesday. It's going to be a Wednesday night hockey game. Someone had asked earlier on who's going to be calling the game. It's John Bartlett and my man, Greg Millen. It's going to be good to see Millsy. I guess I'll see you guys in town here, will I not?
Oh, yeah.
Good stuff, guys. See you in Denver. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you on Wednesday.